there's a whole class devoted to understanding the difference between a rector and a priest in charge, and this is not that class. Okay? This is not that class. Here today for Spiritual University, which is a long-held tradition for nativity, it's an offering, a class offering that we do for the community. And it's not only a religious-based instructional unit. It can have a variety of different aspects. We've done, we have actually had some scholars come. We've talked about mysticism. We've done, health and body and mind health. Okay, so there's various ways that we can participate in this environment, in this space. And so last year, what I did when we were ramping up, we were just starting to meet in person, I wanted to do Spiritual University. I love teaching, and I had a whole series of lectures that went from an introduction to religion through 7 major world traditions that are pretty significant. Not that any religious tradition isn't significant, but the big names, that's sort of like an introductory thing, that I had prepared for my high schoolers that I was teaching down in Louisiana before I was here. So I said, I don't have time to come up with something brand new, so why don't we just take these out that I've written up in detail and go ahead and tweak them just a little bit. So last year, a year ago, we did What is Religion?
Great.
Introduction to Religion outlined with a massive 20 pages. And I just reformatted it for a 6-week course for this. And we talked about all the various ways that we can come to understand what religion is and how each religion has something new to offer and something different to comment on. And yet there are similarities. One of the overarching things that we talked about last year, Linda was there for a lot of it, is that one thing that we want to make sure we do not say is, we don't want to say, God is one. Okay. Coming out of the 90s and the early aughts, there was a big, I'm going to guess that was the high school. Coming out of the 90s, let me date that back. Moving back towards the end of World War II and when Christianity has to do a really big come to Jesus moment because of the Holocaust and what it did to our Jewish brothers and sisters in Germany, there was a lot of biblical scholars, a lot of theologians went back and they're like, well, where in our theology did we get it all wrong? Then there was this big push to really unite Christianity and Judaism, okay, and push it together. It's pretty much the same. We're simple, But one of the problems with saying God is one is that we do things very differently. We have way different claims than our brothers and sisters in Judaism. Same too with our Muslim brothers and our Buddhist brothers and sisters. Not all Buddhists believe that there is a God, or and then what about our Hindu brothers and sisters where there's various conceptions of God, right? So one of the things that we really pressed into last fall was to break down the idea of trying to create a monolithic out of God so that everyone fits underneath an umbrella. And the reason why we wanted to do that was because when you and I decide to say God is one, what God are we thinking of? I'll really answer it. Which God? The God and Father of Jesus Christ, right? I'm pretty sure, as close as we are related to our Jewish brothers and sisters, they're thinking Yahweh, right? And then we have Allah, and then we have in Buddhism and in Hinduism we have a variety of different deities, right? And then so we will tend to take everything and subject it underneath one big umbrella, okay, which is the same problem when we say that we're colorblind, okay? We tend to make everyone white, All right, so everyone becomes Christian and everyone becomes white, and now we can all get along. Isn't that great? It becomes problematic. Anyway, coming out of that, I knew in my head I really wanted to start pressing into specific traditions. Okay? Confucianism, for me, is a tradition that is ancient and beautiful, and it's part of a culture that we, as a Western Americans, don't fully understand in terms of the Chinese culture unless you've lived there and experienced it. But Confucianism is 1/3 of the Chinese culture. And it also is wisdom that we find replicated to some extent in maybe tweaked forms within the gospel narratives. My favorite moment was when I was teaching on Confucianism. So I always start with Hinduism because that's the one of the oldest ones on the book. Okay, we get the Sanskrit, right, and we have some of the early documentations of Hinduism. So I would do Hinduism, then Buddhism comes out of Hinduism, and then I would move into Confucianism, and then I would do Taoism, and then Sikhism. So I would cover that whole range. My favorite thing was getting to Confucianism, and I would have the students, high school students, I was like, write me 250 words on a passage that you read from the Analect. Every one of them would say, oh my gosh, this sounds just like something Jesus would say. And I loved that moment because their brains were all of a sudden realizing that there is wisdom that is timeless. Okay, and that Jesus was born later than Master Kung Fu. And so this knowledge from Confucius would have been in the air, and he would have been familiar with it. And it was so neat to find, I'm finding the Zoom so I can take over. It was so neat to watch those connections. So I chose Confucianism for this class because it's just a wide open field of you probably don't have a lot of knowledge of Confucianism. What do you know about Confucianism in general? Like, what's your working knowledge of it? Proverbs. Confucius says. Yeah. Standard, yes, this strong emphasis on family. Yeah, yeah, the deep connection to wisdom traditions. And we need to, I'm going to repeat what you say, or you can take the mic because Linda can't hear unless I'm on the. Well, I'm just doing it. I want to cut off my sound here, right? Okay, can you now make me a co-host? Okay, did I mute it? Yes, I did. Okay, we've got it now. Now he can.
Thank you.
What do you know of Confucius? He's from China. He's dead. Right? I mean, if you're going to be a teacher of a tradition that's not your own, pick the one that people know very little about as a starting and entry point. Okay? I love Confucianism and I do value it, and it works well actually with my orientation in the world in regards to my activity in the world, because it's a really great socially oriented tradition that specifically is socially oriented, very specifically socially oriented. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to see if I can navigate towards my Word document. So we know very little about Confucius and Confucianism. All right, let me open this other. Don't worry, it's all coming together. I'm trying desperately to not have this totally go off the rails. That's Ellen. Here we go. All right. So here's what we're going to do for the class. All right. The whole goal is to get you a little bit more introduced. I am not a scholar, I'm not a Confucian scholar. I'm not writing papers on Confucius and Confucianism. I did some really good reading to teach a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds, and now I'm just appropriating that material for you guys. All right. So I am not a Confucius scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but the goal of this course is just to introduce you to Confucius and the skeletal structure of Confucianism. Okay, I'm not, again, like I want to be very, very clear so that no one confuses me for a Confucian scholar. I am not that. But you will have a working understanding of the primary principles going on, okay? And at least enough to maybe provoke some more study or some more reading, okay? We're going to spend time looking at both Confucianism and the writings of Confucius. Each class is going to be broken down into sort of like conversation in regards to the skeletal structure, the primary points of Confucianism. We take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the text. Okay, so you'll get a little bit of both each time so that you're pulling both those carts at once. And then you can see how certain things we just talked about have manifested in the text. Okay? We are going to be using the Analects. This is the principal book when it comes to Confucianism as a tradition and even some praxis. The Analects just means statements, okay? And so that's where you get that sort of pithy Confucius says, you know, like I'm sure you can Google Confucius says, and maybe a website would pop up with some little proverb like my husband was saying, okay? This, you'll see more dialogues, and these are all recorded by his second generation. I think it's the second generation of students. It existed for a long time. A lot of what he said existed as an oral tradition. And then I wanted to show you the two texts, and the first one is it's really decent. At the end of the day, the author doesn't actually do what he wants to do, which is to kind of break down the concept God is one. So the title of this book is God is Not One, and it's the rival religions that run the world. Okay, this is a good book. This one's better. Our religions. Someone asked me why. Thank you. That's a great question. Okay. Stephen Prothero writes this whole thing. This one is written by individual scholars from their tradition. This one gets the job done. Okay, this way we open up and we read Harvey Cox on Christianity. By the way, really profound thinker. Harvey Cox is a really great thinker. Syed Hossein Nasr for Islam. Okay, we have Jacob Neusner for Judaism. You have Tu Wei Ming for Confucianism. Okay, one of the other texts I didn't grab from and please pass these, you can look at them, because these are good texts to maybe, if you're interested, to like go through or whatever. One other book that I looked at was a collection of feminist essays in a book titled After Patriarchy. Small little book that was printed probably in the 90s, almost looks like a homemade, sort of text. But in there are feminist scholars writing from their tradition and critiquing their own tradition in where female voices are lacking. Okay, in our dialogues about religion, I always want to be very, very clear that I welcome pointing out where religions fail. Okay, when I approach religions and traditions not my own, I tend to take maybe a less critical approach. As the one eye that I can turn to Christianity, I can tear that apart. But I really like leaning on the scholars who are doing that work in their own tradition. And After Patriarchy is one of those texts where the feminist scholars are writing the critiques. Okay, and you'll see some of that pop up in my material when we get to missing voices. In regards to when I start making comments on missing voices, I want to preface it with, I go with the feminist lens because that is my point of intersection with oppression. I am not a person of color. I am cis heterosexual. Like, I don't have a lot of other lenses to look through. So I try to stay in my lane and not comment or appropriate stories from other people's experiences. Okay. But all of us in here have different experiences in religion. So you'll hear from me, I will use the feminist perspective as my lens of critique. Okay. And if you're wondering why that critique is truncated, it's because I have a limited intersection with oppression. Okay. So I always want to be very, very open about that. The way that I run my classes, and I don't think that I'm going to really have to worry about it too much with this group just yet, unless you're all hiding like super fiery, you know, spirits. But I do like to always open up everything to a lot of great conversation. As I'm talking, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, you can raise your hands, you can say you have a comment, and we can stop everything. I'm not wedded to my outline. We can skip around, we can, you know, I have a structure so that we're not going completely off the rails like we were about 10 minutes ago. But I invite questions and dialogue. You don't have to agree with me. You might have more information than I do on a certain thing. Share it, okay? The only thing that I ask, and I don't think it'll probably be too much of a problem, is just that we always respect other people's opinions and ideas and questions, because really none of us here all see everything the same way. And I want this to be as safe a place as possible for people to really explore where they are in relationship to Confucianism, because it's going to provoke, when you study a different tradition, it's going to cause you to ask questions about your own. It's going to cause you to ask questions about yourself. And it's going to cause you to ask questions about the tradition. And in order for us to have that robust, real dialogue, it just needs to be a safe space. So we're always going to hopefully respond to each other with respect. And remember that when we talk in public, sometimes it's scary. And so we're just going to make that a safe space. Okay. Also, one thing that I want to point out is that as I'm teaching, I will say these words or this question. Does that make sense? And if you look at me and you don't say, no, it doesn't, I cannot fix it. Okay. I've had conversations with students, with people of all different ages. It is not an age thing, but I think we're trained to sort of go, yeah, I understood those words, right? If something doesn't make sense, and I ask that question, it's a great time to say, you know what, Lauren, it didn't make sense. Can you re-explain that one part you were talking about the 3 bonds? Heck yeah, I will. Yeah, absolutely. Because I really want you to walk out of this room with something to chew on for the rest of the week. Okay. So I will always say, does that make sense? And that's your cue to speak up if it doesn't. Also, as I said before, if as I'm talking something doesn't make sense, raise your hands. Okay. I love questions and they help guide me to meet your needs. If you don't ask questions, then it's just me and my outline. Right, Linda?
Right.
So let me see if there's anything I missed. Oh, just a little bit about me. I am originally from Southern Connecticut. I have 2 master's degrees in theology. I'm working on my PhD in systematic theology and political ethics. You'll notice it had nothing to do with world religions. Okay. And I have been here at Nativity for 2 years as priest in charge. We moved here from Louisiana, where I was a teacher for 11th and 12th and 8th graders. That was an experience. And I loved it. I loved it. I still have great relationships with some of my former students. And in fact, one of them came and lived with us for about 9 months and then moved to Denver. So it's such a great profession. I have 3 kids and 1 husband, and I'm biblical. leaders of the church are only supposed to have one spouse. I wonder if, like the author of Timothy, it's usually credited to Paul, but I know there's debate over it, but I like to just say it was Paul. I wonder if Paul was like, I can't believe I have to say this, folks. But make sure your minister is the husband of one wife. Anyway, I like to have fun with the scripture in terms of engaging with it. But anyway, I'm pretty simple, not really complicated. And that's it. So, but you can call me Lauren. You don't have to do the formal pastor or reverend, or call me Lauren. We're all on the same playing field here. And I think that wraps up my just little introductory comments. Are there any questions about the class, or what we're going to be doing, or what expectations that I need to manage? Will there be fireworks? I don't know. Depends on you. Also, we're in the desert. Don't do fireworks.
Yeah.
It's been raining. We can do fireworks right now, but not tomorrow. Any questions? Yes, yeah. In the Analects, I will have that's a great question. So if you have been able to get an Analects, then you can read the whole thing. It's really short, and it's actually not that hard to read. I mean, unless you want to like meditate on certain things. Every week I will have printouts of the specific quotations from the text that I'll be covering. Linda, I'll be sharing my screen, so you'll see them on your screen, and they'll be up here, and then
Great.
if you have your book, you can open up to the page. And I did specify, and I have some copies here, I did specify ISBN numbers so that we could all have the same one. But yeah, it is a specific text. We're just looking at the Analects principally throughout the core part of the series. Today, we'll be looking at two non-Confucian texts, just to sort of like start opening up our conversation about Confucianism's ideas and postmodernity, sort of. I was going to mingle it. Does that answer your question, though? Yeah. And the pieces of paper will always have the where I got everything from. Okay. And if for some reason it doesn't, I have it on my outline and I can give it to you. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. I'm trying. It was a little bit scary there when I couldn't get in to my computer. But anyway, so what I want to do now is, I'm a fan of breaks. Okay, I felt that that worked really well with teenagers. It's got to work well with adults, right? So I want to break here. Bathrooms are on the left-hand side going down the hallway. Women are the right-hand side, the immediate right before the downstairs. And then the men are further down, about halfway down the hallway on the right as well. But let's take just a few minutes to sort of kind of stand up and use the restroom if you so wish. And then we'll just reconvene at about like 6:35. We'll just take a 4-minute break. Get my head about me. Yeah. Linda, you doing good?
I'm doing good. What kind of a turnout do you have?
We've got 4 people here, and then you, and then I think Jay Mashburn is planning to join us, not today, but for the rest of the class.
Great, great. I'm excited about this class.
Yeah, it should be fun and accessible. That's my hope. I hope that that's accessible.
If it's not, we need to ask questions.
Yes, yes. And a darn elm bug decided that my green tea was something that he was interested in.
Sweet.
I almost forgot my most essential teaching thought. I did have students, there was a rumor, I had to nip it in the bud as fast as possible, right? Students who would fall asleep on their desk, and I'd walk over and I would just go on their desk and they would pop up. But then the rumor got around that I was actually hitting students, and I was like, I would never hit students. I'm so bad. But anyway, this is my wand, my magic wand, and I have a. That's right. It doesn't. Anyway, all right. So what I want to do is open up with. So the name of the class is Ancient Wisdom for Postmodern People, right? What does postmodern mean? Yeah, in the abstract way, right? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so Linda, for you, I'm just going to repeat some of that. Postmodernism is a rejection of and a response to modernity, right? Which had a heavy emphasis on ritual and traditions, and this is the way things are. And in postmodernism, you get a stronger subjectivity, you get a rejection of the hard and fast. Scientism is one of the things that you brought up, as well as religious totalitarianism gets rejected. It's not so dualistic. Yeah, rejection of dualism. Yeah, yeah. What other characteristics? So taking this idea of like subjective experience, what are some characteristics of the postmodern world that you would highlight if you were comparing it to modernity? Absence of truth. Yes, yeah. There an S in absence? Yeah. You know, have you ever heard of whiteboard disease? Okay, yeah, that's it. That's what's happening. So it would probably be better for me to say absence of universal truth. Okay. What else? What are some characteristics of the postmodern world? Submission of ego. That's interesting. Submission of ego. The ego isn't all there is. Okay. What are other characteristics of postmodern people? Linda, you can chime in if you know.
Oh, if I know. I don't know if this fits with the postmodern world, but there seems to be an unwillingness to listen to other truths.
Oh, interesting.
Kind of my way or the highway.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm trying to imagine what a word is for that. Yes, that is the collision of objective subjectivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentalism, that's an interesting one. Yes, yeah, it is. But when it's on a individual level, it's interesting to refer to it as fundamentalism, and I don't disagree with you. I'm just still processing what that would be. What other aspects of our postmodern world or characteristics do you see that define it against modernity? What's different between like 2020? Well, no, that's the wrong year. Let's go back to 2019. What's the difference between 2019 and like the way things were done? Like, when do they mark that when postmodernity came of existence? What, like 80s, 90s, or before that, 60s? Yeah. Okay. Okay, 60s makes sense to me because that would be the big rebellion between the generations. That would be the first time you saw such a rejection of traditionalisms. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So it's a rather recent phenomenon. So let's say, what's the difference between the 2000s and the 40s? What's different? What's breaking down? What's recreating itself? Okay. So find a time period where we're not unified because we're fighting a war. What? So, right, but that's right after World War One. Okay, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes. That's where I think I really wanted to head was that where you have this fracturing is absolutely crucial. And I'm just going to put fracturing there because I need to sort of demonstrate something. And Linda, I think I'm still in view for you. When we look at the three eras of history that we have right now, we have pre-modernity, we have modernity, and then we have post-modernity. Okay. Now, these are not hard and fast. I had a brilliant student who was, when I was talking about pre-modernity and then the switch to modernity, she was like, well, you got to think that there were some people in pre-modernity that had modernist feelings. And I was like, fair enough, fair enough. But in pre-modernity, you have the human being defined from external factors. Okay, birth, your family, where you're born. The gods exist outside of you, and you are nothing to the gods apart from trying to please them, right? So I'm using some generic language here, all right? But you're not you as a person don't really matter unless you have certain qualifications that make you matter. Like when we look at our gospel passages, specifically on Sunday, we'll notice that the shock of the passage, this is a teaser, shock of the passage, now don't do any spoilers for the other people because I want them to come, but one of the shocks in the passage is that the rich man doesn't have a name, but the poor man does.
Mm.
And that's big because usually if you had the power and this prestige and the presence, you got your name. So in pre-modernity, humans are more grouped, okay? It's more of like a solid mass. As we move towards modernity, what we start to have is now, like we're over here, maybe the gods defined humanity. When we move into modernity, humans define God. This is where you get that surge. So like with this, like the advent of the Enlightenment and science, and now I, as the human, am determining that that's a pew. Okay, and I'm looking at things and I'm determining what they are, the top-down mentality, but all of a sudden humanity comes in as like sort of the nucleus of everything. Okay, and then as we move towards, so there's a breakdown. Okay, here it was our group is defined by the external elements. Now we're moving over here, and now it's I'm determining everything outside of me. And as we move into post-modernity, which is over here, all of a sudden it's all about I am now defining everything.
Mhm.
Okay, I am defining it. I can exist in my own self, have my own ideas, my own belief systems, and no one else can determine it for me. That's that subjectivity you were talking about. It's a real radical subjectivity. The risk of postmodernity will always be what is anchoring everyone together. If we forget whatever that is, we may all float off like hot air balloons, untethered from anything. Yeah, right? We have a heavy dose of it here, maybe too much. It starts to kind of free up here a little bit, but now, heck, my deity is a pink elephant with purple polka dots that speaks strictly Spanish. Don't you tell me I'm wrong. Right? But I can determine, like I have students who talked about, well, I can just start calling anything language is subjective. That is now a pig, no longer a tree, that's a pig. But that's where that heads, right? So when we look at, we have to, when we look at post-modernity, we have to realize that we are functioning in a very specific time period of history where we have these autonomous aspects, which sometimes can be good and sometimes can lead us towards floating away, like off in isolation. And what I mean by autonomous is that if you break that word down in the Greek, it just is a law unto itself. Like it literally means that you are a law unto yourself and there's nothing else. So I never, you'll never hear me tear down individualism or individual. I prioritize the individual. I like to talk about the individual, but I will ditch autonomy because I think that's the scarier aspect. It's not just that I want to assert myself as an individual, it's that I want to literally disconnect, pull myself out of the communal circuit board and do my own thing without any ramifications or any sort of demand from anyone else. Okay? And so that's what I really will target. And that's what I love about Confucianism is that it will pose a bunch of questions that will confront our postmodern view of that individual subjective autonomous perspective of our lives in the world. It's going to push against that and force us to reckon that we have started to pull apart. A number of my sermons have focused on the idea of our autonomy forcing us further and further into isolation. And if you actually look around, when was the last time your block had a block party? Do you know how many we had when I was a kid? The cul-de-sac? All the parents would come out and we would have barbecues going and desserts out on the table. And this is the 80s. Like, I'm not even going back to like Leave It to Beaver era, right? Like in the 80s, we had our Hot Wheels and we were going down the cul-de-sac and then turning them hard and spinning right out. You know, we were up late and the fireflies were out and the kids, we were all like jacked up on sugar, too much Coke and Mountain Dew and all that good stuff. Have you had any of those recently? Yeah. 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 No, not everyone is closed into their homes. And it's our fear. Postmodernity, while it gives us liberation, this is really interesting. I'm going to get there. But while it gives us some liberation to find out and to determine who we are and ourselves, is terrifying because, like babies, we like to be swaddled up and comforted. We like knowing that there is a fence around our corral, that it's not all going into haywire and into the nether of nethers and chaos. What was the most terrifying thing about 2020? COVID, race riots, isolation. When was it going to end? It's our fear. Postmodernity creates a subliminal fear that sort of surges underneath our epidermal layer. And we keep trying to do things like fill that, mute it, numb it. And what if it's just about, instead of turning outward from what is my community, what if I just pivoted and turned towards community? Now more than ever, Confucius has something to say. I think, not to steal his moment of time in his era, but for us today, Confucius has something to say. I want to bring your attention to the quote. We're not going to go through a detailed analysis of it. I was doing research, so before I move into the quote, any questions about anything I just said about postmodernity, modernity, pre-modernity? Any questions? Linda, you good?
Good,
Good,
definitely.
okay. So I'm going to read the quote, but this came to my attention today because I was doing some research for my dissertation, and I love it when something overlaps. And this is from a scholar, Dorothy Zuela, and she was born in 1929. She comes of age in Reconstruction Germany after World War II, and she is part of the generation that comes into adulthood with the question, what the hell did we just do? What was that? We have a problem. So she's part of the generation of theologians that surges to the forefront and starts saying things like, hey, fellow Lutherans in Germany, maybe we need a political ethics, right? So yeah. Oh, good, yeah. Yeah. So she's part of a triumvirate that actually develops and cultivates something called political theology. Okay, it goes away. She ditches it because she picks up liberation theology because she has a deep connection with the Latin American liberation theologians. But all of her work is oriented towards that can't happen again. Whatever caused that, we have to rectify. Anyway, in her book, The Silent Cry, which is her second to last text before she passes, she writes this, and this is about halfway through the book, a little bit more. It's in the third section. The motto of the postmodern world and life therein may well be, I consume, therefore I am. The artificial, do you know what she's playing off of there with the therefore I am? It's the Hallmark, yes, it's the Hallmark Descartes, the thing of modernity. I think, therefore I am. Now, she says in postmodernity, it's I consume, therefore I am. The artificial of creation of needs is an essential component of economic life. The counter model of live simply so that others may simply live is denigrated as sheer romanticism. We are further removed than ever before from an economy that sustains subsistence and is not hounded by progress. To be overchoiced with 30 different kinds of bread does indeed develop the shopper's awareness of differentiation and sense of taste. However, from the ego that is becoming dependent on such a surplus of choice, it also takes away the time and energy for other life pursuits. The ego is diverted and, with the help of the world of consumer goods, turned in on itself, homo incurvatus in se ipsum, as the tradition used to depict the sinner. Okay, that Latin quote is from Martin Luther. Incurvatus in se ipsum, the person is turned in on themselves. I will demonstrate for you what that looks like. Linda, you've seen me do this before. I'm going over here. How good of a community member am I right now? I'm all turned in. Martin Luther in the 1500s described human sinful nature as turned in on itself. It was concerned with itself. He looked at the demands that were being articulated through the selling of indulgences and the troubled minds of the layperson, and saw how turned in everyone was. He himself as well, turned in, right? And so for him, the encounter with God and the event of faith is the thing that unravels us. Okay, he gets into some hot water with some other things he says. Don't worry, we can take him apart any time of day. Okay, but incurvatus in se, we are turned in on ourselves. Our liberty that we claim we have now isn't, because it's forcing us further into that tighter coil. No one's safe. No one's safe. Teachers should have guns in classrooms. Rather than fix the system, postmodernity can't respond to it, and so we just adjust again. I guess everything's violent now. We all need to be carry and conceal. Does my 8-year-old need a license now? Because I'm scared, right? We just start, we don't want to confront anyone, because if John has a view of something, I've been trained in postmodernity to let you have it. Okay? Where does that break down? Where? Oh yeah, I'm gonna find my own little group. Human beings are cliquish creatures. We like our groups. We do. And they're beautiful. Your friend group is beautiful. There's nothing wrong with it, but I'll have to avoid John because I can't actually have a disagreement. You know, the number one thing I have noticed in most of my time as an adult is the lack of ability of many adults to handle confrontation. It's astounding, but we can't. We're not trained to do it. We're trained from really little. Everyone, so I'm right on top of I'm right on the beginning of the generation of everyone gets a ribbon. Everyone gets a trophy. Okay, I literally, like, my brother was not that, like, and we're in the same generation. My brother did not have that, but I was like right in there where everyone was getting ribbons for everything, because everyone needed super encouragement, right? But then the problem is that I don't learn how to fail.
I don't learn how to make mistakes. I don't learn how to make errors. In my parenting group, I'm part of the parenting generation of like strong attachment theory and constant positivity and no cry. I had screamers, so that went out the window very early. Okay, right? But like we have this idea that we can cultivate and raise these people without any sort of like negative influence. But if John has an opinion and I have an opinion that are different, wouldn't it be best as human beings if we could somehow talk it through in terms of not having to agree with each other, but realizing there's beauty in the distinction and the difference, right? So what we do is, in order to sort of soothe the underlying fear of that curving in more and more on ourselves, retreating to our homes, stockpiling weapons, hoarding cash, filling our pantries. Think about the average household. I'm almost nearly describing my household except for the stockpiling of weapons. Okay, my husband is a hunter, and so there are some hunting rifles, but not stockpiling. Okay, but think about the way that we were doing it before COVID, if you want the honest truth. Okay, so postmodernity is just this isolating and curving in. Okay, and what Zuela is picking up on is the fact that we use consuming. It's our number one thing. That's our definitive trait right now in postmodernity, is the consuming of things. Has anyone noticed going through the store how prominent, so it's consuming and numbing, how prominent alcohol is everywhere? It's not just in the liquor stores, it's wherever alcohol is sold, and it's up front and center. Consume and numb, consume and numb. Advertising, you need the best iPhone, you need, like it's all of it is playing in on this fear and these needs that we're told that we have. We probably don't have them, but we're told that we have. And postmodernity is just feeding into that because I don't have anything else that defines me. I've rejected it. Religion, who needs it? God is dead. Traditions in my family, stupid. Okay, my parents are boomers, they don't know what they're talking about. School, do it myself. I'm gonna unlearn. Real thing. It's a real thing. Right? I'm gonna make up. I'm gonna define myself by turning into myself. Okay? This is where we are right now. There are beautiful things in the freedom of thought that we have acquired in postmodernity, but there's also risks. Okay? There's also risks. So, with that, let me pause. Any thoughts about the stuff that has just been said or the quotation that you have in front of you before I hop into the outline real quick? Yes. 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 Spiritual but not religious is what Tim said, Linda. Yeah, that's the big thing, the picking and choosing. And we also do it with our relationships as well. As soon as someone becomes, oh, John just said something, well, now this is tension filled, so now I'm going to pick and choose who I'm friends with, right? There's this 100%. It's a potpourri of stuff, but none of it forms a story. Okay? None of it forms a story. I am Christian in light of all my studies. I adhere to Jesus the Christ because that story anchors me. I believe it. That's why I'm up here. That's why I do my studies. And I'm not saying I haven't demythologized the heck out of a lot of claims, but that story reminds me that there's something outside of myself, because if it's left up to me, oh boy, I'm in a whole heap of hot water. I have to define everything, even myself. And that's the lie, though, because the reality is that we don't fully define ourselves. Our genetics define us, right? Our family traditions define us. Where we were born defines us, right? Where we went to college defines where we didn't go to college, where we work, the things we've done, the experience we've had, the pain we've suffered. All those things define us. Traditions aren't bad. When they become traditionalisms, then they become a little bit bad. But story and myth and all these things, we don't need to strip it away from the human being, because a naked human being is a scared human being, and a scared human being is a violent human being. And in postmodernity, we've stripped everything back. It's all a lie. Nothing is real. We might not even exist. What if this is the dream and the thing we do at night is actual reality? Have you gotten into those discussions before? Yeah. My favorite one is, what if, most recently, what if COVID was the antibody for the earth? What if we're part of a system that is sort of like when we get a virus and we take, or when we get sick, we take some antibiotics? What if we're in a host that is desperately, what if we're in a drop of water on a leaf and we think we're something huge and mighty, but really we're super tiny, right? These are the questions of postmodernity. Everything is stripped back. Nothing is as you see it. Terrifying. Please give me a story I can cling to, right? Just a story that tells me there's something, a path I can follow, something that hems me in, that reminds me to look another way because I get stuck in this way. So with that, okay, any questions? Anything to add? Linda, you doing good?
Doing good.
Yay!
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop screen sharing here. Stop the share. Okay, so I'm gonna hop over here. Now we have our Linda back in full. All right, so Confucianism. I had to set that up. I had to get a little despair provoked, because I really do think that Confucius has a lot to say to us in 2022. Okay. So one of the quotes that I took from Tu Wai Ming in Confucianism from the book of World Religions: we are about to embark on the study of an ethico-religious tradition that so delicately shifts the moral focus from abstract principles to lived realities, that it challenges many of our familiar categories in the comparative study of ethics and religions. Okay? Confucianism is going to challenge everything you think you know about the way the world goes, the way religion runs, the way human beings are and should be, the ethical principles that, you know, like, is it virtue ethics, or is it, you know, situational ethics, or is it deontological ethics? Confucius is before that, before those conversations, okay? And what Confucius offers us is going to challenge us specifically as postmodern individuals. Confucians have had a faith bordering on fanaticism in the ability of human beings to improve and even perfect themselves. You can change. That is one of the most invigorating statements that I have said today. I literally had goosebumps. We don't need to be stuck. That's part of the lies that we're told, that we just need to acquiesce to the systems that we're working in. No, you can change. And if you can change, John, and that means Tim can change. And then that's two people who change. And then maybe they infect Jackie. Right? And then it spreads, right? So nothing is forever. That's the thing about Confucianism, is it's just going to pop open a little crack in your sidewalk and just let that beautiful little flower grow right up. You have a question? Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is what we're embarking on. This is why I wanted to do Confucius and Confucianism, because I think we need this. I think we need to reframe some of the way that we've been seeing things. Okay? Confucianism is a worldview, a social ethic, a political ideology, a scholarly tradition, and a way of life. It's the whole bag. It's everything wrapped up in one. It's had profound influence for over 2,500 years. okay? It's still in play. It hasn't been, canceled. All right? It's still in play. It's a philosophy, religion, and a way of life, and so embedded into the Chinese culture, society, and politics that the ethics therein are taken for granted. We are going to be encountering a rock of Gibraltar, okay, as we encounter Confucianism. But for those who are born and raised and dwell and marinate and live in Chinese culture, that strand of Confucianism weaves in and out of life. You don't even notice it because it's just part of who you are. For us, it's not. It's going to rock. It's going to cause us to sort of maybe stumble and trip and go on our way. Okay? It places a high value on antiquity and history, not traditionalisms. Remember, everything changes. You can change. That means things can change. All right? But there's going to be an emphasis on you have a history. In other words, you have a story. Don't run away from it. It's part of who you are. Okay? The people who came before you are important. The people who come after you are important. You are important because you're the linchpin between those two generations. Right? Okay. We have a view that is more newer, younger, faster, stronger, right? We have a phone, literally. How many of you have iPhones here? You're Android? Are we all Android? You're Android? iPhone? Okay, iPhones are literally hardwired to break down after a few years, right? Yeah. Yeah, like newer. You don't even have a choice. You have to get a new one, right? All of our technology is wired that way. Like I'm literally looking at possibly needing a new computer because this one's slowing down too much, right? We want newer, faster, stronger. Confucianism is going to go, slow it down, get a little older, take your time. Why don't you be weak for a little bit, get wrapped up in some song for 3 months? Literally, Confucius did that. Like forgot to eat for like weeks because he got wrapped up in a song. Okay. So it's really going to come at us, and it's also anti-autonomy. Okay, so it's really gonna hit. One of the things that I read when I was studying all these religions was that Taoism or Taoism is actually more in sync with some of the Western values because it really highlights the individual and it's this understanding of self-freedom and liberty from all the confines and restraints of society. But Confucianism is a whole different thing. It's going to come against our tendencies towards autonomy, okay, that objectified subjective self, okay, that becomes isolated and calcified, all right, it's going to knock on that hard shell and try to crack it open. Is Confucianism a religion or a philosophy? We'll never know. We'll never know, or we will, hopefully by the end of this class. There is no institutional form of worship for Confucianism, all right, but there are religious components to it, okay? Has anyone here seen Mulan, the Disney movie? Yeah, it's got Confucian themes, and the relationship between the living and the ancestors, the dead, is super strong and has a religious component to it. So there are aspects that, yeah, that have Mulan. I would recommend it. It's a really great movie. So it's got some religious components, but you don't go to a Confucian temple. Okay, families will have places where the ancestors might come and visit, but there's no like church that you go to on Sundays. Okay, most Chinese people see it as a philosophy or a way of life. Okay, the government lists Buddhism, Taoism, Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, and Islam, okay, as recognized religions, does not list Confucianism. There's no clergy, no hierarchy, no congregation, no temples really, and uninspired texts. There is no claim that that's inerrant. You can disagree with Kung Fu Tzu. You can disagree with Master Kung Fu Tzu. Yeah, if that's the thing, right? And okay, so yeah, so there's religious components to it, and then there's not religious components to it. At least not the way that we see religion in the West. Okay, we look at the Bible and we say it's God's word, right? Which means so many different things. But we have very concrete ideas of what religion is in the West. For the Chinese, and specifically for Confucianism, it's not so cut and dry. Okay, there's no interest in a God. None. Okay, there's an impersonal force called heaven. All right, and they don't, there's no speculation. This is where it's real close with Buddhism. There's not a lot of speculation. The point is that you're here and you're going from point A to point B. Let's do it right. Let's do it well. That's sort of the idea. Speculation and being a theologian of Confucianism is sort of oxymoron. You just aren't going to be a theologian because you're not talking about God. You're not speculating about things unseen. You're really dealing with the concrete here and now because that's where you are. So make sure you and your relationships are functioning in the highest amount of harmony and peace. Okay, and keep improving yourself. All right. And there's very little concern for death in the afterlife, though the emphasis on ancestry actually almost functions as a form of afterlife. Okay, it actually does kind of start to function as a form of afterlife. Let's see. Whatever religion there is in Confucianism takes place here and now in this world of pain and overcoming. Earth is our home, Confucians have insisted, and now is our time. Okay, you remember when Jackie defined postmodernity as in relationship to yesterday? Today versus yesterday, right? Well, that's Confucian. You are here now. This is where you exist. And we could use a little bit of here and now. I think we're terrified of the here and now, okay? To some extent, I think we're kind of scared of it, okay? And so we want to be grounded in the here and now so that maybe we can make an impact. Yeah. I don't know the... Okay, excellent. Yeah, is he influenced by Confucian thought by any chance? Yeah. Yeah, we live very much tomorrow. Okay, we live very much tomorrow. And we probably also live a lot in yesterday. So if you have regret and anxiety, you are living in tomorrow and yesterday. Okay. Living in the now is a real, it's a discipline for us in the West. We're not allowed the space actually to rest long enough in a now. Okay, just look at your schedule. Just open up your Google Calendar and tell me how much now you have. Mine looks like something like someone like a 4-year-old came across with colors and just painted it. All of it is filled in. Okay. One of the aspects that I want to talk about before I move into, I think I'm supposed to also talk about the history tonight. That's outline. Let me just scroll on down here. Okay, yeah. Okay. So Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism comprise China's 3 teachings. And I just wanted to highlight this aspect so we just always respect where it's coming out of. If we're asking it to perform a Western function, it's not going to. Okay, so if we know the context in which it's sort of embedded, so we're gonna move into a little history discussion. Just real brief. I'm not gonna bombard you with too many historical facts, but just give us a context, okay? And these 3 teachings intermingle and mix with each other. And there's no jealous God, there's no monotheistic tradition. It's Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism all swirl, sort of like, anyone see the movie Inside Out? The Disney movie Inside Out? Okay, so it's a really great movie. If you haven't watched it, I recommend it. It's animated, but it's it was sourced by neuropsychologists or whatever. But anyway, there's all these different emotions, and joy is trying to dominate as the number one emotion, that everyone must be joyful at all times. This ends up with her kid host getting very, very depressed because the other emotions aren't allowed center stage, just joy, but sadness has to sometimes come up to the front. But at the end of the movie, they sort of start to touch the same memories. You see joy and sadness swirling. When I think of Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism, I think of one of those big memory marbles, just colored in all three, swirling around as one big entity, and it's just infused with all three of them, but still distinct. You can still see all the different aspects of it, but it's there. It's all one thing. Okay. Most notable of the three is Confucianism's impact on defining Chinese mores and mind, politics, economy, and society. Confucianism held the helm of orthodoxy for roughly 2,000 years. So the number one ethical praxis was Confucianism. The way that the society is structured, the way the human structures herself in that society, the understanding of relationships between human people and different pairings and different bonds, all of that is influenced by Confucianism, okay? So in China, there's a strong community emphasis, not because of whatever political or economic theories. It's literally been embedded for 2,500 years, and it's called Confucianism, okay? Which has socio-political ramifications. It really, really does. So the history, just briefly, Confucianism comes to the surface during the chaotic wars during the turmoil of the Zhou dynasty, 1046 to 256 before the current era. That's a lot of years before Jesus gets here. Okay, that's a lot of history. All right. There were different schools of thought. So when China was going through this tumult, 5 schools of thought came up. One of them was Taoism. Okay, the other one was Confucianism. Confucianism ended up being the top dog in the fight and became sort of the overarching thing that started to assist with the tumult. Okay, it assisted people with the fear of the chaos that was circling around them. Okay, Confucius is not the founder of Confucianism. What? Just like Jesus didn't found Christianity, right? Jesus was a very faithful Jew in the rabbinic tradition. Okay, not in the priestly tradition, but in the rabbinic tradition, the teacher, the synagogue, the scholar, the group, the community. Okay, not a hierarchy of pure and impure, but he wasn't the founder of Christianity. He wasn't the first Christian. That wasn't even Paul. Right? We have to get outside of Samaria before you start to get the actual first Christians. Anyway, Confucius did not invent Confucianism, okay? And it's not like Buddha and Buddhism. That is a direct correlation, all right? But we have this guy who goes by the name of Kung Fu, okay, Confucius. So Confucius is the Latinized version of Kung Fu. Okay, he's teaching. He has some students that follow him. Those students have some students, right? So it's sort of like a school of thought, but Confucius is just doing his thing and arguing for this best way of how to live in this boring and tumultuous area. And then it starts to form itself later. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, good. All right, so what other parts of history do I want to share here with you? Confucius considered himself more of a transmitter. That's where he's sort of like Siddhartha, okay, who ends up becoming the Buddha, right? So he is a transmitter of information. He does not want to be front and center. That's not his role. He's not trying to start a tradition. He's transmitting information so that human beings can get on in this world in a good way. Okay, his contemporaries are Socrates, Israel's prophets. This is an amazing time of history. And Siddhartha. So you actually have Buddhism and Confucianism sort of operating, because Buddhism comes out of Hinduism. Hinduism is India, and it's gonna move into China, and then in China itself, you have Confucianism. Okay, so that's where those two strands meet, and same thing with Taoism. Okay. He desired to give life to the past and rituals, to find roots for deepest belonging and communication. You see why I picked this for this time? A desire to reach back and to pull into the now. Okay, not to adhere in a concrete, calcified way to things that work, but what back here works now? What community, what relationships, what ideas and concepts. So he really anchors people into their story, that they have a past, and it goes beyond, for me, July 6th, 1975, right? Like it goes beyond, it goes into April 11th, 1947, or May 14th, 1942, or maybe even June 1st, 1920, right? Or I mean, yeah, I think my grandparents were born in the teens of the 21st century. But you know what I'm saying? Like your history is actually all the way back. Okay, and Confucius wants to anchor us all there. Okay. So next week we're going to talk about Confucius and Mencius. We'll get to that. But before we go, do you need a little break? I just want to read one poem before we shut down. You guys okay? Okay, great. Going to, any questions about just some of the historical facts I kind of threw at you, but it was mostly just to ground it. All right. Oh, you're naughty. Oh, I know what I have. There we go. All right, this is a poem by Wendell Berry, and I discovered it when I was researching this for when I was teaching it in high school. And I think it's a really great way to kind of wrap up all that we've been talking about in regards to postmoderns being exposed to someone like Confucius. And I think it's a really good thing to sort of meditate on as we exit. I'll read it. Are you okay with me reading it? If we have become a people incapable of thought, then the brute thought of mere power and mere greed will think for us. If we have become incapable of denying ourselves anything, then all that we have will be taken from us. If we have no compassion, we will suffer alone. We will suffer alone the destruction of ourselves. These are merely the laws of this world, as known to Shakespeare, as known to Milton. When we cease from human thought, a low and effective cunning stirs in the most inhuman minds. Everything in this poem is going to be addressed as we study through the different aspects of Confucius's thought or conceptions and Confucianism. Any thoughts about the poem? Any questions about anything? I want to make sure to keep this on time, so. Linda, you doing okay? You're muted.
There we go. This is very profound by Wendell Berry.
Yeah,
Wow.
being isolated monads might have a certain amount of liberty attached to it, but there comes a whole bunch of problems. So maybe
Mhm.
Confucius will give us some good news. If we're not going to listen to Jesus, then maybe we'll listen to Confucius.
Hmm.
He hasn't been so abused in this part of our territories. Any last thoughts or things to add to before we head out? Yeah. Yes. 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 Exactly. Exactly. Your homework, if you want to choose it, is to watch the movie Frozen at least the first 10 minutes and notice the overlapping similarities between Elsa's initial conception of what it means to be free and liberated. And then you can compare it. If you watch the whole movie, then you can compare it to how she redefines it at the end. But it's right in line with what you were just saying in terms of real freedom is when I can put my freedom down to meet you where you are, where I have control, where I have responsibility. This freedom exists if I am pulled away and outside of community. Is that freedom? That's the question we have to ask. Or is real freedom manifested only in the presence of the other, in which I have to respond respectfully, right? And responsibly. I can't walk through Tim. That's rude. So when Tim is standing in front of me, I can't walk through him. But if everything is about me and my freedom, like you were just saying, then I can treat Tim like he doesn't even matter.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's really, really good.
Oh.
Linda, did you catch that?
Yes,
Good.
I'm trying to think back about Frozen. We
Yeah.
should have a night when we can all watch Frozen together.
Yeah, I actually do have a little snippet. I have a portion of a movie that we will watch in this course. It's not Frozen, but it's pretty good. It's Dead Poet Society. Yeah.
Ah,
Most of us have seen it, so we can watch a little bit and still know how it all ends, but it's a really great movie that highlights certain aspects of Confucian thought and sentiment.
mhm.
Yeah, we need to pull together now more than ever. Now more than ever. So, all right. Well, it's over. I've kept you longer. You're going to be late for your next class. I'll write all your teachers a note. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Lauren.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this. Oh, it's not, it's not the topic, but, okay, thanks. Yeah, I've had some Jewish friends that said no to actually this concept. Oh, no, I know, I'm very familiar with Roar and Roar's work. Yeah, very familiar with that, and I've heard a lot about the movers prior. Thank you so much, Tim, thank you. Yeah, it's a really beloved book, and so I've heard great things about it, and I've heard not so great things about it, but that's how all of them go. Yeah. Safe driving. I do think so. Thank you so much for checking though.